Jai Sri Radhe. Greetings from Vrindavan. Today we're going to do something a little special. Of late, I've been doing the Imo Gauri Shyam, 3 verses from the Madhura Mangalacharanam of Gopala Champa. But it's hard for me to keep my mind fixed on one thing at a time. At any rate, I wanted to do this because I've been thinking of the idea of essential verses. So I observed that the Tattva Sandarbha has primarily prose and quotations from the Bhagavatam, and a few what are called karikas. So generally speaking, in a prose work, the authors in Sanskrit have a tendency to put their most significant passages or their most significant ideas into anushtup or into verses, and these are called karikas. And then they expand on the karikas with what they call a vritti. So that's really what Jiva Goswami. That's not the way Jiva Goswami does it in the Sandarbhas. In the Sandarbhas, it's all prose. And then here and there, once or twice in some certain significant places, he writes a karika. But I don't think there's more than 5 or 6 of them in the whole Sandarbhas. And then there are a few Mangalacharana verses. But these verses, these 4 verses that we're going to chant today, these are significant because they are all written in what we call lyrical meters, longer meters of 17 syllables or longer. So these 4 verses are in 3 different meters. One is Sragdhara, one is the 2 are Shardula Vikridita, and one is Shikarini. So these are all familiar meters, longer meters. But generally speaking, you can say that when there is a work that's written in prose or written in anushtup meter, that if there's some verses that are of the longer lyrical type meters, then they have some special significance. They're attracting some special attention to themselves. So especially here in the Sandarbhas, there are 6 Sandarbhas, but the first 4 Sandarbhas are about Sambandha Tattva. The 5th Sandarbha, Bhakti Sandarbha, is about Abhideya Tattva. And the 6th Sandarbha, Priti Sandarbha, is about Prayojan, Prema Tattva. So the 4 main verses that are found, one comes at the very beginning, in the beginning of Tattva Sandarbha. The next one comes at the end of the Sambandha section, end of last verse of Krishna Sandarbha. It's the concluding summary verse of the Krishna Sandarbha, the summary of the entire 4 volumes that make up the Sambandha section. And then, of course, the verse at the end of the Bhakti Sandarbha is the verse that summarizes Abhideya Tattva. And the verse at the end of the Priti Sandarbha is the verse that summarizes Prayojan Tattva. It's kind of interesting because these verses do not necessarily follow exactly the trajectory that you would expect. For instance, if I was to say I have read the entire Sandarbhas and I'm going to summarize the contents, you would not get these verses, except for perhaps the very first one. So I'm just going to go through them and give a brief explanation, and then we'll chant them a couple of times so that you can memorize them, or at least so that I can memorize them, so that we can relish them and meditate on them, word by word, relish the mood and the spirit of the Sanskrit language. On a side note, all this talk about Krishna West is a little depressing for me, because I always felt, or at least that was Prabhupada's first intention, I think, when he came. Whatever his intention was, somehow or another, he managed to instill in the followers a sense that India had conceived of human civilization in a more cogent and naturalistic way. It had discovered the secrets of the inner life, and that the Western society, which was so externally oriented, so empirically oriented, so rational, and day by day losing its contact with its spiritual essence, with its soul. So because of that, we always felt Sanskrit. There was always an aura of luminousness about the Sanskrit language. There was one, I'm sorry to go into a tangent again, but Geoffrey Mosaif Mason was a very brilliant man. I don't know, he must be still alive. He is a brilliant man, no doubt about it. And he had a number of careers, but he began as a Sanskritist because his father was a disciple of Paul Brunton. And so Geoffrey Mason, he talks about how in his, through Paul Brunton, he had received that kind of sense of some divine mystical power in the Sanskrit language. And then, of course, being so smart, when Mason he went to Harvard and he learned Sanskrit and became a Sanskrit scholar very quickly, a brilliant scholar, and associated with some of the best Sanskritists from India, and wrote books on Sanskrit poetics and so on, before he suddenly jumped ship from Indology into psychoanalysis. Very interesting man. But his thing was that Paul Brunton, his father's guru, whom finally he rejected as being a phony, because one of the reasons being that he claimed to know Sanskrit and he didn't know Sanskrit. Like many Western scholars who go to India and come back after 6 months and they know Sanskrit, they've studied Sanskrit, they put it on their resume. Knowing Sanskrit means what exactly? Knowing Sanskrit means to entering into the mind of someone like Jiva Goswami. That's what Sanskrit means. Jiva Goswami expressed himself in Sanskrit. His mind, his thought processes took place in Sanskrit. And so to enter Jiva Goswami's mind, one has to follow the path of his words, and his words are in Sanskrit. So for me as a Krishnaist, I wish that we could go from A to Z right away, that we could go from the inchoate hunger for spirituality that exists in the confused and brilliant West, confused by its own brilliance. All the way to an actual appreciation for the spiritual ideal culture of the yogis. All the yogis of India. So, let's do the verses. For me at least, prema passes through the channel of love for Sanskrit, because it is through Sanskrit that I find the 6 Goswamis, the minds of the 6 Goswamis, and of others. This is a fascinating tradition, my friends. There's plenty of material here to preoccupy your intellectual and spiritual hunger. Right. Yasya brahmeti sangyam kvachidapi nigame yati chinmatra satta Vyangsho yasyangshakai svair vibhavati vashayan eva mayam pumanscha Ekam yasyaiva rupam vilasati parama vyomni narayanakyam Sasri Krishno vidhattan swayamiha bhagavan prema tatpada bhajam. So this verse is obviously following the main guideline for the Sambandha section of the Sandarbhas. So vadanti tattva vidas tattvam yajnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdyate. So that verse is the guideline for the first 3 Sandarbhas. The 4th Sandarbha is Krishna Stu Bhagavan Swayam. So the whole thing is contained here in this verse, right? So yasya brahmeti sangyam kvachidapi nigame yati chinmatra satta. So the chinmatra satta, the fundamental ground of being, which is pure spiritual consciousness, or the being of pure consciousness, that state, which is one aspect of the absolute truth, the non-differentiated absolute, the Ekameva Advityam, the pure consciousness, that is sometimes called Brahma, Brahmeti Sangyam, Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavaniti Shabdyati. And the second line is the Paramatma, so the Paramatma is also Puman or Purusha. So he's the Purusha, Pumans, he's the Angsha, who along with his Angshakas, Yasya Angshakai, so the Angsha is the Purusha, Paramatma is the Angsha, and he controls and expands Maya. Vibhavati, Vashayan Eva, Mayan Pumasha. Vibhav, Vibhu, he is the Supreme Person within the world. He's the God of this world. That's Paramatma. And then the third one. So generally speaking, when the Mayavadis think of God, they think of Paramatma. So the concept of Bhagavan had to be introduced, and then the Mayavadis had to respond to that, which is what Madhusudana Saraswati does. So the third line says, Ekam yasyaiva rupam vilasati parama vyomni narayanakyam. So Narayan is the name of one of Bhagavan's forms. So the third line applies to Bhagavan, Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavaniti. And where does he exist? He is there, Vilasati. He has his eternal pastimes in the Parama Vyoma, in the spiritual sky. So he exists in transcendence, in pure transcendence. So the ground of being is Brahman, the God of this world, creator, maintainer and destroyer of this world. That's the Purusha. And Narayana is God, Bhagavan, who exists in his opulence, in the spiritual world, in his own existence, Sway Mahimni. And Sasri Krishna, so but Krishna himself is Swayamiha Bhagavan. So may Swayam Bhagavan Vidatang Prema, may he bestow prema on his devotees, Tatpada Bhajan. So there's an Ashirvad in the last line, which is quite correct. All these verses will probably take the form of some kind of Mangalacharana. Now the second verse. So now the second verse is coming at the end of Krishna Sandarbha. And this verse is now, after in the first verse there he's explained that we're going to go all the way up to Sri Krishna, but there's no mention of Radha there. So now when he comes to the end of Krishna Sandarbha, so it's very interesting to what Jiva Goswami has done really in the Sandarbhas, because the whole point of the Sandarbha is that he's using the Bhagavatam only. It's called Bhagavata Sandarbha. And yet, in the Krishna Sandarbha, he can come to the final conclusion, this verse, when Radharani's name is not even mentioned in the Bhagavatam. So somehow or another, through the use of other texts and through the use of clues that are there in the Bhagavatam, Jiva Goswami comes up with the final conclusion of the Sambandha section, and that is that the Sambandha, first he says in prose that the Sambandha is Krishna Radha Sangvalita Sri Krishna. So Radha, the Krishna adorned by the presence of his Hladni Shakti potency Srimati Radharani. That is the final conclusion of Sambandha Tattva. But then in the verse, he doesn't make, this is, because he has that just previous to that, he says there's Madhave Naiva Radhika, Madhave Naiva Radhika, Shyama. Anyway, there's this Rik Parishishta text that Jiva Goswami likes to quote, where it says that Radha is with Krishna and Krishna is with Radha. The energetic, the Shaktiman and the Shakti are inseparable. Gaura Shama Rucho Jwala Bhiramalai Akshno Vilaso Savai Nrityanti Virashesha Madanakala Vaidagya Vidigdatmavi Anyonya Priyata Sudha Parimala Stomo Madaviksada Radha Madhava Madhuri Viravitas Chittang Mama Kramyatam. So this verse, if I went to explain it completely, it would take some time. We've just been doing, and I'm going to return to that, the Imo Gauri Shamo verse at the beginning of the Gopala Champu section on Madhura Rasa. And there that Gauri Sham, Imo Gauri Shamo. So here again you have Gaura Sham. Gaura Sham Rucho Jwalabhir Amalai Rakshnor Vilaso Savai. This is a nice verse in grammatically speaking because you have these instrumental plurals, and some of them are feminine and some of them are masculine. So now sorting them out, because sometimes an adjective can be either masculine or feminine. So which does it go with? It's kind of interesting. Anyway, the verse is a prayer. It's saying that Radha Madhava Madhuri Bir Abitas Chittang Mama Kramyatam. So that always in Sanskrit the last line is the one you look at first. So may Radha and Madhava's sweetnesses, Madhuri, may the sweetnesses of their love, may the sweetnesses of their relationship, may the Madhura Rasa exemplified by Radha and Madhava, may it overwhelm my mind. Mama Chittama Kramyatam. May it overwhelm my mind. We've been talking about this also, this idea of Tadakara Karita, of making one's mind totally take on the shape of the divine. That's what we're doing here, this Bhakti Yoga exercise, even to the point of reading these texts and learning the Sanskrit and trying to bring one's mind together with the minds of the six Goswamis. Just like that famous verse that Raghunath Das Goswami prays. He says, may my mind, which is like an eager and expert jockey, a horse rider, a chevalier, may my mind, which is the chevalier, which wants to go where? It wants to go to Prema Bhakti. It wants to go to Seva for the Abhira, Palli, and Sutta, the Krishna's beloved Radha. So in order to get to the Seva of Radha, he says, may my horse riding, my desperate, he wants to ride a horse that'll get him there. And so he says, let me ride the horse of Rupa Goswami's words and thoughts. That's what we're doing here. We're riding on the words, on the thoughts, on the refined poetic sentiments of these pure devotees of Radha and Krishna, in order to to create in our own minds a mirror of their mood. So may my mind be overwhelmed by the sweetnesses of Radha and Madhava. And what are those sweetnesses like? What are their contents? Well, first of all, Gaura Shyama Rucho Jaravi. The whiteness and blackness, the colors, the illumination. We talked about that in the class yesterday, that the Gaur and Shyama represent this duality on a deepest philosophical level. But on an external level, the duality reaches its perfection in Ujjvala Rasa. So here it's Ujjvalavi. The Gaura and the Shyamatva, the Gauratva and the Shyamatva here is everything that is represented by the differences that exist between Radha's way of loving and Krishna's way of loving. Radha's way of being and Krishna's way of being. Radha's femininity and Krishna's masculinity. That's all there. Then the next part is the Utsava, the festivals of joy given to the eyes. These pure festivals of joy given to the eyes. What happens then? Nrityantibi. So the festivals of joy, the pure festivals of joy that are given to the eyes by this Gaura Shyama makes their own madhuri dance. We can interpret this in different ways, I think. I can do that whole first line. That it's they're looking at each other, Radha and Krishna, and so their eyes are dancing in enjoyment of their observing each other, of finding the opposite, of finding the other in each other, of finding their opposite self, of finding their missing self in the other. So that's the first line. The second line is that because they are filled with all kinds of unlimited arts, maddening arts of erotic love, and that these madhuris, these sweetnesses of Radha and Madhava are dancing on account of that. And then they are again intoxicated with the fragrance of the nectar, of the ambrosia that comes from their mutual love. So this verse goes very well with the verses that we're doing at the beginning of Gopala Champu. as a kind of a mirror verse, and which is very suitable because, as we were saying, that the Krishna Sandarbha and the Gopala Champu are very closely linked, because Jiva Goswami says that which I have, that Siddhanta that I explained in the Sandarbha, in the Krishna Sandarbha, I'm now going to explain from the point of view of Rasa in the Krishna Sandarbha. So, let's move on, because this is going to get too long, my dear friends. So now this is at the end of Bhakti Sandarbha, and this is the conclusion to all those very long. Bhakti Sandarbha now is longer. Bhakti Sandarbha is as long as the first 4 Sandarbhas. Guru Shastram Sraddha Ruchiranugati Siddhiriti Me Yadetat Tat Sarvam Charana Kamalam Rajati Yayo Kripa Madhvi Kena Snapita Nayanam Bhojayugalo Sada Radha Krishno Asharanagati Tau Mamagati Guru Shastram Sraddha Ruchiranugati Siddhiriti Me Yade Tat Tat Sarvam Charana Kamalam Rajati Ayo Kripa Madhvi Kena Snapita Nayanam Bhojayugalo Sada Radha Krishna Vasharanagati Tau Mamagati. So, as I was chanting, I'm just thinking. We have these 4 verses, and these 4 verses do not summarize the contents of the Sandarbhas, but rather they represent the conclusion, Jiva Goswami's own conclusion. Now, what I've been trying to say, especially when we talk about Radha Rasa Sudhanidhi, the Radha Rasa Sudhanidhi is an interesting text. I don't want to get into it too much right now, but the idea is that the Radha Rasa Sudhanidhi represents something of a schism in Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. Differing views, perhaps slightly differing views, but when you get into the subtle details, then subtle points become major. So there were subtle differences in the way that Harivansha and Prabodhananda saw the practice of bhakti in the Rasika tradition, as opposed to, let's say, the way that it was being shown in a more scholarly way in the Ballava and Gaudiya traditions, especially in the Gaudiya tradition. So in the Gaudiya tradition, we have this adherence to the Bhagavatam, and in the Radha Vallabha Sampradaya, they say, the heck with the Bhagavatam. We know the conclusion. This is the conclusion. The conclusion is that Radha and Krishna, Radha Bhakti, Radha Seva, this is what is being said here, and these are the conclusions. So once you've gotten to the conclusion, then why bother with all the other stuff? So I think in some ways that even though, this is the kind of trap that we fall into, in order to explain a higher truth, you have to make use of that which is known, and you have to make use of the means of argumentation and the evidence and so on that is available to you in order to make your point. But when your point has been made, when the conclusion has been reached, then the imperatives become different. Because when you arrive at a conclusion, then really that conclusion is going to raise new counter arguments and new doubts and new problems. At any rate, the conclusion we had in the previous verse, you see, that Radha and Krishna are our goal. So if Radha and Krishna are our goal, then to what extent do we still need to other than to have general awareness of the conclusions that are expressed in the Bhagavatam, in terms of our devotional life, the Bhagavatam loses its relevance. What do we need to know really about Nrsimha or Varaha and so on, or about Vamana and the other incarnations? We go straight to Radha and Krishna, and that's where the mind rests, and the mind wants to be filled with Radha and Krishna alone, and it doesn't want to be disturbed by even other avatars. And this thought comes up again and again and again in Prabodhananda Saraswati's writing. And I think that Jiva Goswami is sympathetic to that. So here he just says, he's summarizing bhakti. So now in bhakti we have the 64 angas and everything's so important, Vidhi bhakti and all the different rules of Archana, the Hari Bhakti Vilas and everything like that. So everything that's been said on bhakti. Well, here, what is his conclusion? His conclusion is Guru, Shastram, Shraddha, Ruchi, Anugati, Siddhi. So there he's more or less, whether he meant this to be taken sequentially, but why not sequentially? Guru Padasrayas Tasmat, the first step is Guru. Then Shastram. By Shastram he would mean Shravanam Kirtanam. And Shraddha, so we're used to seeing Shraddha at the beginning, but because Shraddha, Ruchi, and Anugati, if you remember that Shraddha, Ratiya Bhakti Ranukamishati, very important verse there in the third canto. Satam Prasangat Mama Virya Sangido Bhavanti Hartkarna Rasayana Katha Tajjoshana Dasho Pavardhavatmani Shraddha Ratiya Bhakti Ranukamishati. So here it appears that he's following that Shraddha, Ruchi, and Anugati. And then Siddhi meaning here perfection. So the development of the practice of bhakti. He says all those things, they reside at the lotus feet of the divine couple. Right? So he's saying that bhakti is dependent on grace. And that's what this verse is saying altogether. That progression that goes through this Guru, Shastram, Shraddha, Ruchi, Anugati, Siddhi, that this progression is actually taking place by the grace of the divine couple. Kripa madhvi kena snapita nayanam bhoja yugalo. Their eyes are filled with tears of the ambrosia of their compassion. And so, Sadaradha Krishno Asharanagati, they are the destination for those who have no other shelter, so may they be always my shelter. Guru Shastram Shraddha Ruchiranugati Siddhiriti me Yadaitat Tat Sarvam Charana Kamalam Rajatiyayo Kripa madhi kena snapita nayanam bhoja yugalo Sadarada Krishno Vasharanagati to mamagati. So, Sharanagati. Bhakti here comes down to Sharanagati. That's what he's saying. So now the fourth verse. The fourth verse comes down to Prema, the last verse of the Priti Sandarbha, and so it's the last verse really of the whole 6 Sandarbhas. This is also in Shardula Vikrita. Ali paripalita prabalita sanandamalokita pratyasham sumanah falodaya vidho Samodama modita Vrindaranya bhuvi prakasha madhura Sarvatishayi sriya Radha madhavayo pramodayatumam Gulalasa kalpadruma. So here in the last line, May the Ullasa Kalpa Drumaha, may that desire tree of Radha and Krishna's, Radha and Madhava's jubilant Ullasa pastimes, Pramodayatu Mam, may it bring me joy, bliss, pleasure. So the girlfriends of Radharani, here this verse is the first one that mentions the Sakhis, and it's also the first one that mentions Vrindavan. So significantly, I would say, you have Vrindavan Dham, Sakhi Tattva. It would be interesting, really, very interesting, to understand, to unravel really the nexus that existed between Prabodhananda Saraswati and Jiva Goswami. The lines, direct and indirect lines that connect Prabodhananda and Jiva. Because this Prabodhananda Saraswati, and through him the Radha Vallabha Sampradaya, and it's a tattva that's accepted by most of the Vrindavan Rasikas, that you have four tattvas. You have Radha, Krishna, then you have Sakhi tattva, and you have Vrindavan tattva. So those four. And you could say Vrindavana would represent, let's say, the Sandini Shakti, Sangvit Sandini. The gopis, they represent the Alis, the Sakhis. They represent the devotees, the community, the audience. And then Radha and Krishna, the Ashraya and Vishaya. To set the scene of the divine comedy as it is manifest in our little corner of divinity. Ali Bhikari Palitak. So the Sakhis, they're the ones who plant this tree, who nurture this tree, who expand this tree, who observe its growth with joy, who, when the tree is filled with fruits and flowers, they are the ones who pick them and relish them, who take joy, like in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Kaviraj Goswami talks about Mahaprabhu being a mali, being the gardener, and having the prema fruits and wanting to distribute them. How much can I distribute on my own? Please help me to give these fruits of prema out. So here, the Sakhis, they are the ones who, Sakhi hoite hoy e lila revista, Sakhi hoite hoy lila revista, Sakhi asadiya Sakhi vistara, Sakhi vistariya Sakhi asadai. The Sakhis are the ones who expand this Leela, and the Sakhis are the ones who enjoy this Leela. The Sakhis are the authors of this Leela, and the Sakhis are the audience. The Sakhis write the story, and the Sakhis enjoy the play. So where is this tree growing? In Vrindavan, Vrindaranya Bhuvi, in the fertile ground of Vrindavan. Prakasha Madhura, so sweet again when it's manifested. Man, with what? With beauty and with opulence that exceed anything to be found anywhere in all the existences. That is the Ullasa Kalpadruma. So that's the vision of prema that Jiva Goswami has. And I think we can stop there. I'll just repeat the verses one more time, just to get them all together at once. Yasya brahmeti sangyam kvachidapi nigame yati chinmatra satta अंशो यस्यांशकैः स्वैरविभवति वशयन्नेव मायां पुमांश्च एकं यस्यैव रूपं विलसति परमव्योम्नि नारायणाख्यम् स श्रीकृष्णो विधत्तां स्वयमिह भगवान् प्रेम तत्पादभाजाम् घोरश्यामरुचोज्ज्वलाभिरमलैर् अक्ष्णोविलासोत्सवैर्नित्यन्तीभिरशेषमादनकला वैदग्ध्यदिग्धात्मभिः अन्योन्यप्रियता सुधा परिमल स्तोमोन्मदाभिः सदा राधा माधव माधुरी विरवितश्चित्तं ममाक्राम्यताम् गुरुः शास्त्रं सदा रुचिरनुगतिः सिद्धिरिति मे यदेतत्तत्सर्वं चरणकमलं राजति ययो कृपामाधिकेन स्नपितनयनां भोजयुगलो सदा राधा कृष्णौ शरणगतितो मम गति आलिभिः परिपालितः प्रवदितः सानन्दमालोकितः प्रत्याशंसुमनः फलोदयविधौ सामोदमामोदित वृन्दारण्यभुवि प्रकाशमधुर सर्वातिशायी श्रिया राधा माधवयोः प्रमोदयतु माम् उल्लासकल्पद्रुमा राधा माधवयोः प्रमोदयतु माम् उल्लासकल्पद्रुमा Here we go again.